CRN, Chuck Wilder here. Let me tell you about my guest, Kimberly Dvorak. She is the award-winning national security, border security investigative reporter for TV, radio, and the print media. She is also the senior foreign policy advisor for the Committee for Responsible Foreign Policy, TV correspondent, CW6 News San Diego, as well as One American News Network. And her website is the KD Report. Kimberly, how are you?
I'm fine. How about yourself on this beautiful President's Day here?
It is a beautiful President's Day, and I'm glad that you and I reported for work, sir. Yep, sir, ready to go.
Yeah, no days off for us. No days off.
Are you on Facebook and Periscope today?
Yes, I am.
All right, because I went over there and I was getting last week popping up there, and I wasn't sure, and I thought maybe you were in a different location.
You're just a little slow, that's all.
Yeah, they're that way sometimes. Anyway, whenever you go there, listener, streaming live, periscope.com and Facebook, Kimberly Dvorak, Dvorak. Interesting report here today. We'll start out with the Vindmin testimony hoax. Equals a court-martial. That sounds very, very serious.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I kind of chose President's Day to discuss, the Democrats' bid to impeach the president, and then also I chose to kind of delve into a little bit about the candidate for the Democrat Party, Mayor Pete, as everybody calls him, Buttigieg. So I thought those two would be perfect for today since it is President's Day. And the Vindmin hoax, I think, is kind of actually something that can be a lot more serious. It doesn't seem like the Pentagon will go down this road, but there is actually law on the books within the military that giving your opinion and then disparaging the President of the United States is actually a punishable crime within the military code. And the code is Article 88, and it could end up in a court-martial, or at the very least a dishonorable discharge, which is stapled to every job application that you put in once you leave the military. So Mr. Vindmin actually fits the criteria here for this Article 88. Again, everybody at the Pentagon said he's not going to face any action. He gets to go back. Mainstream media is saying that he was fired. He was not fired. He's still getting 100% of his pay. He'll still get his benefits. But it's worth looking into the fact that, that this could happen. And there's precedent for this happening within the last decade. And to that, I'll go back to the Michael Hastings Rolling Stone story that quoted General Stanley McChrystal, and he was shedding a not very favorable opinion of the president then, President Obama, and he was relieved of his duties for talking about the president in such a manner, because the military does have a structural and hierarchical system, and they do build on trust, and they do have a lot of codes, and they follow things by the rules, because the old saying goes, if you don't follow the rules, people die. And when you're dealing with war, that's a lot more common than maybe working at the local Bank of America. Well, I guess bank robbers could be a different.
Well, and another thing, not only the possibility of somebody dying, but even a lesser than that, but still very serious, you say, the main reason for the regulation on that number 88, Article 88, is that it's to keep military members who have access to major weapons of war who ever get involved in politics.
And to that I can say, I'll say, coup anyone? I mean, this is something, the impeachment, a lot of people have described it as a soft coup. Well, this again here under Article 88, this falls under those parameters. So for the people within the military, and they do have to follow these military codes, and a lot of them have just gotten way off base and they're not following it, and it's a jungle free-for-all out there right now. And maybe the military should do some soul searching here and look to their forefathers that came before them, and think that maybe it's not so bad for us to kind of be apolitical in these situations, especially when you have a mainstream media that is just throwing partisan stuff at you day in and day out. So, I mean, the military put this, this is something that was created century two ago that people did not, this isn't how you reacted if you're a member of the military. And moving forward, it might behoove the Pentagon to actually go back, revisit some of these rules, write out a nice little memo, and put it out to all of the, military members who are serving abroad as well as in the United States. These are the rules that you must follow. And if you don't, this is the action that the military can take against you. And that could be court-martial, it could be just dishonorable discharge, but certainly they need to revisit these rules. And Mr. Vindmin, who really is the one that propagated this whole impeachment scenario, actually, he should be made the example here. I have a friend that actually worked at the NSC, which is where Vindmin was, and he had an article that he put out in the Wall Street Journal last week and said that he was escorted from the building exactly like Vindman was, because he was working in an administration where he actually is trying to do what the president wanted him to do, but the person who was running the NSC at the time, General McMaster, did not appreciate that he wanted to follow what the president did. So they relieved him of his duty, and he was taken out with security exactly the same way as Vindman did, and nobody cried a river, nobody threw up arms and said we need to impeach the president for doing something like this. So this is something that has blown completely out of proportion here. And even you're seeing things like General Kelly writing and doing a speech last week completely lambasting the president, and all that does in the end is it's going to tarnish Kelly's reputation as being a good general. Because in the end, you can go after the president on a lot of things, but when you're in the military, they do have protocol, and you cannot do this. And if Mr. Kelly would like to give up his stars, then maybe he can, go back to, lambasting the president if he doesn't really care for him all that much. He stayed with an administration for a long time for someone that now he says he has such distrust and, animus relationship with. So it's just, when you start seeing these things, where does it end? Now we've set a new precedent. Is it going to be okay for the next generals to actually just take the president out if they don't like him? There's tradition and there's rules here, and I think we got to follow them.
I had a guest, and I'm trying to recall this, but I think they said that Vindman has a twin brother.
Yeah.
And he is actually the guy who has to edit the book that Bolton did when it comes to secrets.
Yeah.
Have you heard that?
Yeah, you can't make stuff like this up. But also, it just kind of goes back. There is military code here on this, and the president does have a say-so in books that come out, especially when you're dealing with national security. And the NSC is actually national security at the highest order. So the president does have a beef with this, and he can weigh in on this. That aside, the military should be policing their own, so to speak. And they like to, go in and prosecute their own people within their own court system and all that stuff. This is something that needs to be looked at. You've got an awful lot of people out there that, because they don't like the way Trump, goes about doing whatever it is, and he wants to bring the troops home, and they don't want to do it because for whatever reason, they just think that America needs to be the world's police, and they come out and go after the president. Well, when you're in uniform, you just can't do that stuff anymore. And we've seen lower ranking people who have actually been kicked out of the military for using social media and things of that nature. So it happens, but these upper echelons people need to be held accountable as well.
All right, now then, in today's report, you have another one, and I got to tell you, this is an eye-opener. Could a former Naval Intelligence officer, Pete Buttigieg, be a CIA asset? Wow, very interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, of course, we don't know an awful lot about Mayor Pete. He kind of sprung up out of nowhere for this presidential election, kind of following a similar path that Barack Obama did. And it was very successful for Barack Obama, who became president. And we're seeing, obviously, they study different things in university and all that stuff, but we see we're starting to get a better picture of what Mayor Pete is actually about. And I mean, if you watch any of his speeches or his stump speeches when he's out there, he says a whole bunch of words that mean absolutely nothing. I mean, he's mastered that. So, I mean, you're sitting there going, okay, so I think the only thing I got out of that, the sky is blue today, and we all have to get Trump out of office. Okay, yeah, but he was trying to, you know, when I was in the military, when I served overseas. And so he makes this, he really is putting out there that he's been in the military, and that's one of his big platforms that, you know, for his experience at age 38 to run for president, he served in the military. Well, kind of sort of served in the military. He was part of a special branch that is funded by large corporations in essence, and they put these men and women, they join kind of like the Naval Reserve or the Marine Reserve Army, but this is a little more specialized. And he was able to get into the military. It's a very small program. They only accept a few people into this program. Hunter Biden, curiously, is one of these people that went to this program. So it's basically a career track. So if you want to have a career in politics, these politicians and the military and some big corporations like McKinsey have come up with a way to get this military experience, make you qualify to be president of the United States. So in essence,
and as you point out, McKinsey and Company, okay, they have a contract, listener, with the Department of Defense as part of a border task force on business and stability operations. It sort of sounds like, go over and get us some business, right, for America. And I think that's what he was fighting for, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I mentioned this only because I'm a girl, and for the women that are listening out there and watching, you'll understand this. Kate Spade makes purses, some clothing and shoes, but she's famous for her purses. She's passed away, but the company goes on. But this is kind of a mid-end, this isn't something you pick up at Target. So this is something that you sit and you look at it, and why was Pete over there trying to get materials to help Kate Spade out? In essence, on the taxpayer's dime and on the military's dime. It just shows you that this is a very lax program. And it also shows that, he went through the naval intelligence aspect of it, which he did, and, kudos and brownie points for getting through that. But now his friends are the CIA. The friends are his NSA buddies. The friends are...
Now, let me back up a minute, okay? To make a point, I want listeners to know that she said, good for him to go through that naval blah, 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 right? But he didn't go through what you normally go through when you're becoming a sailor. No boot camp or anything like that.
It's a paper trail.
How to shoot. No.
Yeah, it's a paper trail.
Forget it,
Exactly.
I think I know why he wanted that purse too, by the way, but I'll just leave that. Yeah.
Maybe it was a gift to his boyfriend or husband now.
Yeah, a gift to a close friend.
Could be. They have good taste. In that case, in that event, they have good taste because she does make some very lovely purses. So in any event, but yeah, I mean, these people, when they say they have military experience, they went over to Afghanistan. When you're in programs like this, it's kind of like Duncan Hunter Jr. He was a former congressman. He resigned in January, but he also went over to the Middle East as a Marine. And, when they go, they're a lot more protected. They're not on the front line. They're not the tip of the spear. They're the ones, Mayor Pete most likely was hanging out in the green room, over in the Middle East and, looking at a lot of intelligence and that kind of stuff. He wasn't out there going and hunting down bad guys and knocking down doors and having his life on the line every day that he was over there. That's not the case.
But
this is more of a paper trail.
You say he bragged about 119 trips outside the wire and whatever that means, but then you have this DD-214 that explains all this stuff. That's blank. Yeah. Explain that.
Yeah. Well, if you go outside the wire, like say you're in Afghanistan and you're inside Kabul and you're in the green zone, you're fairly safe. There've been some attacks inside the green zone, but if you go out and you want to go to a local eatery, you go outside the green zone or outside the wire. So, Mayor Pete was basically a paper pusher. I'm not saying that he's not smart, because I think this is probably the smartest way for someone like himself who wants to possibly be president of the United States. He doesn't have the experience in the military that he's trying to sell. And this is where I get back to like
this. He throws out this word, let's see, stopped off in Somaliland. That's kind of a key word.
Yeah. Well, this is what I mean. It's like a paper trail, and you can get to those places. As you know, you served in the military. You jump on any old C-130, and they take you to these places. You just hop on if you're, wanting to get around to different places. It's not necessarily that, he went over there and he had to like get in and sneak into the country, and, fight a war over there or anything. We have military that go all over. And for the most part, if you're in the military and you're detailed to a specific, region or a specific, intel portion, he was an intel. He probably found intel over there, but he tries to glorify.
Let's dig a little bit deeper in the few moments that we have left. When we return, Kimberly Dvorak, D-V-O-R-A-K, and you can go to periscope.com or Facebook, see her live. She'll also be on YouTube a little bit later on, as long as she doesn't mention the whistleblower's name. All right, gotta get that out. All right, Foreign Policy Advisor for the Committee for Responsible Foreign Policy. And not too much time left, but
okay.
Endorsements.
Yes.
Spooks are the other spies, right? Go ahead.
Okay, so this is something I want to leave the listener and the viewer with. On Mayor Pete's campaign for president is the son of the president of Afghanistan. He's his senior foreign policy advisor. So the president of Afghanistan, his son, is the senior foreign policy advisor for Mayor Pete. That should strike, a lot of people, thinking that we're going to get out of these wars if we're not. No. I think if I was Bernie Sanders and I had this information, that Bernie Sanders ought to be out there telling the folks that Mayor Pete is not all what he's cracked up to saying, that he has all this experience with the military. He's got all of these endorsements of the CIA and other spooks. And the fact that he has the son of the president of Afghanistan working on his campaign, what kind of judgment does that show? And is he really going to quit and end the wars in the Middle East, which most of America want, and the Democrats say they will do? And Bernie said on day one, if he was elected, that's what he would do. So you wait, coming up in the debates, I bet Sanders jumps on this at some point, because most Americans want us out of those Middle East wars. Mayor Pete is directly tied to these people through his campaign by having the president of Afghanistan's son working on his campaign. And that should stun a lot of people.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, listener, also on this latest report, you get into the Iowa caucus and the app maker and Budabek's connection to that too. Unbelievable.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it makes you question. There's a lot more questions that are surrounding Mayor Pete, and I suspect the Democrats will get to them eventually, but it'll be an interesting next few months for sure.
$42,500 that he put into that app, Shadow, whatever. Hey, in the last minute or so, here, Sanders, I guess it is, talking about bringing Hillary as vice president. I think it was Sanders.
No. It was Bloomberg. It's Bloomberg.
Bloomberg. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, yeah. I'm thinking that ain't going to work anyway. And I made the comment today when I was reporting it on the news. It's people around Hillary, they kind of die off all of a sudden. So she might become president after all.
Yeah. Never know.
That's another way to.
Another day for another story. But yeah, it's really interesting to see. I think a lot of people are putting, Mayor Bloomberg, starting to kind of lead the pack and all of this stuff. But I've seen him speak on a couple of occasions, and that he's really short. There's no getting around that. He has no charisma. He has no, every president, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Trump, surely, they have this aura about them where people are gravitated to him. Not the case with Bloomberg, and I really think in the end the Democrats would flee and not even show up at the polls if Bloomberg ended up being the candidate, because he stands for everything they're fighting against. They don't want any more old rich guys there, and they don't think anybody should be able to buy anything, and that's all Bloomberg is doing, is buying his way into the conversation. So I think he's got a tougher road. Yeah.
He has a history. He has a history about being racist too, and you notice he's paying Obama a lot of money to talk about how good he is, right? Mm-hmm. So there we go.
All right.
Hey, Kimberly, enjoyed our meeting again today, and we're going to do it next Tuesday, okay? So Kimberly Dvorak, D-V-O-R-A-K, and her website is thekdreport.com.